fundraising. And it's late. We all know that's it. Yeah. So,
not but least.
No. Ryan Myers, who is here raising money, has a fantastic startup, and he will be sharing firsthand his strategies, the ups, the downs, the good, bad, and ugly of fundraising. Okay, great. So we're going to kick it off. I had two.
You might want to show me how to do that.
Do you want to do your own slides?
That'd be great.
Or you want me to? Okay.
Maybe I should just tell you.
Yeah. Well, you could, if that's easiest. And please, for our online audience, speak loud, guys, and stay for the questions so that we can try to really move forward. Do you really want to do your own?
Or no, I'm fine. I'll just keep an eye on it.
Okay.
Thank you, Crystal. Right. Hey, very nice. I'm very impressed. I didn't know what to expect, and I'm kind of overwhelmed here. But getting to the point here, you can see me wearing a hat there, so you can't tell I'm quite as bald as I am. But that baldness here is a function of my angel investing. I just want you to know that I had a full head of hair, but for the angel investing. I started out in the 1980s. I was a lawyer at that point, still am, I guess, and doing mostly IPOs for small tech companies. As an angel investor, I've ended up, along with my wife, investing, I think, in north of 100 companies. As noted on the screen, I'm part of, as Kristen mentioned, all the major angel groups here in Boston, and I co-manage Sidecar Angels, which is also very active. Before jumping into the nuts and bolts of my presentation, let me take a moment to provide some background that may explain why angel groups operate as they do. Although many angel investors like to operate on their own, and it's quite appropriate to do so, it's also quite common for them to join together and combine forces with other angels to establish angel groups. There are three primary reasons why they do this. Probably the most important is to take advantage of the maxim that many hands make light work. When we talk about the work of angel investing, we're mostly talking about the due diligence associated with making an investment and digging into the technology, into the market, into the startup's financials, the projections. All takes an enormous amount of time if you're doing it right. And sharing that work among the group saves a ton of time, and it makes for light work. A second reason for joining forces is because by offering to make an overall investment in the hundreds of thousands of dollars rather than individual checks, 5,000, 10,000, an angel group can potentially negotiate better terms. And a third reason is that to bring the benefit of the expertise that you have within the group, such that someone who's specialist in, let's say, health tech, can help someone who only knows IT to make a better investment. So, and by the way, and maybe more important to you, is that there are very clear benefits of working with an angel group in terms of you as an entrepreneur. Certainly one reason is, as I mentioned earlier, the check size. Dribs and drabs of 5,000 or 10,000, or don't hear me as turning my nose up, but they're nothing compared to a couple 100,000 that an angel group can provide. A second important benefit is investment by a high quality group can and often does lead to co-investments by other angels and other angel groups, such that $250,000 check that you receive from the first group can be multiplied or magnified by follow-on checks as well. And that expertise that I was referring to earlier, that the angels provide to each other, becomes available to you once they write a check to you. And you, in fact, can turn to the expert in your area within the angel group. And that can be very meaningful all by itself. So one nice thing about the Boston area is that they have maybe 5, 6, maybe even as many as 7 different angel groups. And as a result, you can work with any number of them. And for that matter, if you view it as as taking your chances. You have 7 chances in Boston, whereas in other towns, you may have none, or one. So that makes a difference. As you can see from the screen, oh, you're way ahead of me? No, there you go. All right. As you can see from the screen, I'm about to talk about 5 rules for the process of pitching angel groups. There's no magic to my 5 rules. I shouldn't have called them rules, and certainly not called them laws, but nevertheless, and for that matter, my co-panelists are going to have their own 5 laws as well. But these are some of the ones that I'd recommend that you keep in mind. Starting out, the law of timing. There is generally a ladder for how startups can successfully raise money. And angel groups are several steps up that ladder. As a result, it's important to know when your startup is ready to approach angel groups as opposed to another time, and you want to wait until the time is right. The money raising ladder, I mean, I'm not telling you things you don't know, but I'm going to step through it anyway. It's more or less like this. In terms of the steps, step 1, it's going to be your own check. Big surprise. And what you're going to be doing with that is validating your idea that it has value. I mean, it's good to have an idea. You got to establish its value as for your own benefit, no less seeking funds from others. And you want to start building a business plan. Your step 2 or rung 2 on the ladder is you have to establish that you have a valuable idea. And that was step 1. But now you're raising money from maybe friends and family, if you've maxed out your credit cards. And now what may be most important is making sure that your idea is indeed your idea, that this is not everybody's idea, that it's protectable. And having a protectable idea is paramount to being able to be funded. So you want to spend some money, and seeking funds from friends and family at that point for that use only makes sense. Let me talk about step 3. That's where you're going to be approaching individual angels. Your idea now is valuable. You have protection for it. And now what you want to be doing is presenting them with a business plan that you've been working on and a well-constructed pitch deck. The validation from the real world is what you want to now obtain with the funding you're going to get from your individual angels. You need to go out and validate. This can't still be on paper. This has to become real. There has to be something in the way of traction that will attract the attention of angel investors. And that's what's next is you move up from individual angels and all to an angel group. Here again, your idea has to be valuable. It has to be protectable. And you have a business plan and a well-constructed pitch deck. But now you need validated validation, potentially sales, let's say an NIH grant, experts who are attesting to the value of what it is you're doing. But there's something more here too for angel groups, and that is you have to have plausible argument for why the money they're providing together with your idea is going to get to a value inflection point. You can't raise $100,000 if that only gets you nowhere. You have to get to somewhere. And that's the value inflection point is basically, put it this way, it's the point where your idea, their money, the 1 + 1 is now going to equal 3, or better yet, 33. So that is what you'll need to then successfully approach angel groups. There are, however, size limitations to what angel groups can provide. There are some angel groups that can provide endless amounts of money. I don't know of them. I hear of them. But the truth of the matter is, the truth of the matter is that once you pass into 7 figures, $1 million or so, you're getting towards the top end of what angel groups can provide. Here in Boston, there are exceptions where we provide several $1 million. And for that matter, Kristen and I are both members of a group here in town that I think came up with the better part of $7 million. I won't talk about the company, but I mean, it was a pile of cash. But in the scheme of things, those are the unicorn situations as angels are talk about the real area that where if you need to be raising more than $1 million and certainly a couple $1 million, you need to be thinking about alternatives, which will mean venture capital. And in a few minutes, I will turn to Ryan to talk about that, who is indeed in that world all by himself. Hey, all right. Sorry, no. Hey, next rules are shorter. So bear with me. The law of first impressions. Everyone has heard that you only get one chance to make a first impression. Well, when it comes to angel groups, it's important to recognize that you only get one chance to make any impression. It's another way of saying that angel groups only look at companies once. And if you flub, that's kind of the end of it, at least with regard to that angel group. As a result, the preparations I was describing in point one, take them very seriously because it is your chance in the limelight with the angel groups, and you want to take maximum advantage of it. Luckily, as I mentioned earlier, in Boston, you have 5, 6, 7 different angel groups. So if you flub it with one, you just take a shot at the next one. All righty. Let me just say. What's that?
We talked too much.
Yes, we did. All right. There are 4 aspects that should be high in your mind when you're approaching the angel groups. Warm introductions. There's no substitute for a warm introduction. Reach out to your friends, your LinkedIn friends, your Facebook friends. Find a warm introduction to Boston Harbor Angels, to Hub Angels, to Launchpad, etc. It helps enormously. Your initial contact, presumably in this world, is going to be an email. It needs to be pithy and really pithy. I mean, it can't go much beyond the first screen. It needs to be pithy, compelling, believable, and honest. And run it past your 3 favorite business people who are going to tell you the truth to make sure it's right and refine it. Make it right because in many respects, I hear you too. You're only going to get one quick look from most angel investors. They don't have time to study it and figure it out. And don't forget to touch on why it is 1 + 1 is going to equal 3. You don't necessarily have to prove it, but you do need to touch on it. The deck should in many ways be very similar. It needs to be pithy, compelling, believable, and honest. It needs to be polished, but don't have it be too polished. Being too polished actually can be, I've seen it in any number of presentations where people go, wait a second, it is unbelievable. So not that you want to stumble or stutter, but nevertheless, you don't want to be too perfect. And the presentation itself, and this is inside baseball, but it's an important inside baseball. Choose carefully who's going to make the presentation from your team. Intelligence and expertise are very important, but there's charisma really counts. It's embarrassing to say, but in an angel presentation, the person who presents with a sort of zest and charisma has just a super leg up. And so if you have 3 founders and one was really good in the charisma department, but maybe not quite as brilliant as another, still give them a chance. It may make a difference. Rule 3, the law of process. Serious investors, which include angel groups, don't write checks without doing substantial serious due diligence. As a result, you need to deal with the fact that you're going to be poked and prodded, and you're going to be asked questions and more questions, and they're going to want to review documents and scrub your projections and otherwise get into the nitty gritty and the term. It's at times it seems endless, all which will take your time away from what you think is most important, and that is your product. But even when their questions are dumb or their ideas are crazy or the terms are unfair, you gotta bear with it. The process is important. And I don't know how many times in presentations afterwards, when the person has left the room, people talk about whether or not this founder is coachable, or whether this founder, looks like someone I can work with. And you want to, in the context of the process, you want to convey the fact that indeed you are someone that can be worked with. So luckily, in terms of poking and prodding, there's a direct correlation, very strong direct correlation between the groups that do the most prodding and the groups that can write the largest checks. So at least there's an upside to the pain. Rule 4, the law of the first angel group check. Okay, let's say you've been successful. The angel group's check is in your hand, or even better yet, in your bank account. Now you must abide by the law of the first angel group check, which means you must now perform. The angel group has done its part. Its 1 + 1, its 1 is already on the table. Your 1 is now everything. And if you aren't turning it into 3, no less 33, or at least have the perspective, or the hope that that's going to happen, that's an issue. Those business plans that you presented, those projections that you presented, you now have to actually make them happen. And instead of being your own boss, like so many entrepreneurs I want to run this business myself. Now you have bosses. True, they're not bosses per se, but you know what? They want you to report to them. They're calling you up. They're asking you questions. They're pushing. They're asking time frames and otherwise being a pain in your backside. It becomes a lot of pressure, big surprise. And what's kind of worse, just to throw more on here, if you're successful, you're still likely going to need more checks, which means more investors, which means more road ahead of people prodding and poking you and otherwise putting pressure on you. I exaggerate, I suppose. Some people thrive on this pressure. Some people not so much. So in essence, the law of the first check is in many ways a cautionary tale for being careful about what you wanted, what you thought you wanted. Be prepared to be that guy who has to actually work late into the night and into the morning and into the next day, because that's kind of what you signed up for. Hey, lastly, the law of fake it till you make it. There's been a lot of questions about that one. Let me start by saying that any angel investor won't say this, but they should, and indeed I'm about to, and that is, if you fail, you will be forgiven. The stories are legion of founders who have failed and lost every one of their investors' red cents that were invested, and then come back and succeeded. They learn. They learn from the failure, and did fabulous. I don't need to run through the list. You all know the names. What investors, however, so failure is something they understand. What they don't understand and what they really can't accept is the dishonesty. It's just, I'm not saying anything that you don't already know, but even if you're not headed off to jail like Elizabeth Holmes, your chances of ever raising another one of those red cents is just gone. It's forever gone. So I think that was an easy way. That was a fast one, that fake it till you make it rule. Let me turn at this point back to Kristen. I don't think if you click the clicker here, I'll point out that if you're really interested in this in a kind of dweeby way, there's actually very good books out there, but this one's probably the best. It's a solid book. It's by two of Boston's best angel investors by far. They've been running Launchpad for 20 some odd years. And I can't speak more highly of the quality of the advice that they give. And feel free to email me if you'd like. You can see me there. And now, I turn this mic over.
Questions.
Oh, we do questions? Oh, no.
Questions. So thank you so much, Jeff. There was a lot in there. I'll read between the lines on all of that. So there's a lot. And I will open it up. We have time for 1 to 2 questions for each, and then you'll get a chance to do the whole panel. Okay?
So you ask now, not wait
Yeah.
at the end. Okay. So Jeff, you mentioned the business plan. I've heard different things from different people. Business plans are passe. But you mentioned them. Just need a set of slides, but maybe you need an extensive document with writings and backup text. What's the expectation?
Yeah, I don't mean to exaggerate, but a deck is lovely, but you've got to have the substance that underlies the deck, because they are going to come for you. Okay. They are going to say, all right, so we said this in the deck. Come on, where's the citation to that figure? You said it was a $60 million, opportunity here. Where's that come from? And if you don't have it, if you're sort of like, well, I'm pretty sure I saw that in The Economist a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't fly. You need to actually have it in writing, ready to go, because as I said, you're going to get poked, you're going to get prodded, and if you don't got it, they're going to begin to worry about your honesty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for all of the expertise you give us. I have a question in terms of the relationship you will have with the founder. I know that's a very big part of the dynamic that goes into determining whether you invest or not, right? You want to know you trust the person to get the money to. I've got a lot of different feedback too, similar to the other one, but this was in regards to a relationship. A lot of founders that I have right now, friends with, they talk about their relationship with their VCs. Some of them talk about it in a way that's, I don't want to call it a dictatorship, but it's very authoritative. Essentially, they tell them this is how you told us these results, but we want to make it more aggressive. We're going to give you this. I want you to accomplish that. And then I've gotten other friends who said, okay, the relationship with their VCs is more or less that it's almost like a trailer, almost symbiotic, where they give them access and resources to a network, and in return, they want, some type of flexibility, being able to, like you said, fail, but fail gracefully. What's that fine point that any founder should aim to have when it comes to a relationship? Because I'm a believer that, I didn't get to a point in my life now about taking orders, right? Nobody has a follower. But at the same time, I do recognize that I want to be able to have access to that type of expertise where I can grow and become better. So I've never been a fan of following orders, but I do want to have access to the best type of expertise, advice that I can have. How do I project that in a way that's not, come this way?
Well, I'm so glad you asked that question, because in many respects, I focused entirely on the presentation to the angel investors. And you're right, the VCs are an entirely different creature, but nevertheless, speaking from my experience, and maybe Ryan can even speak more clearly because he's dealing with the VCs. But my own sense is that when you're talking with angel investor groups or VCs, it's a two-way street. They need to get comfortable with you, clearly. They're not going to write a check for someone that they're not comfortable with. But you know what? You need to get comfortable with them. And if they are the authoritarian kind of person, and you don't work well in that context, you have your answer. Now, a lot of people will try to modify themselves when the $2 million check is being dangled in front of them. And they'll say, all right, I'll deal with this authoritarian monster. It sometimes works. Oftentimes, you probably should have gone for the guy with the $1 million check, who was, in fact, more simpatico. So, yes, it is a dance. And if you're not dancing well, be very careful. Yeah.
Yeah. So one more.
Jeff, great presentation. I hear a lot of people say you need to be coachable. You said that. How would you define coachable? What's your definition of being
coachable? Most, like, all right, just take Steve Jobs, incredibly uncoachable. It just, no, it was his way or highway. And yet very successful. I have a sneaky suspicion Elon Musk is the same. So the idea that if you're not coachable, you can't succeed is nothing short of craziness. Nevertheless, in terms of answering your direct question, angels want to, and it comes back to the earlier question, have a simpatico sense of you, that they can talk to you. You aren't brusque. You aren't. You listen. All right. You want to know how to fake it? You listen intently. You write things down. You look like you actually shit about what they're saying, and you just and you work on it, and then you send them an email afterwards saying, "I wrote. I did write down what it is you were saying." You may still think it's malarkey, but by the same token, you convey the sense that you heard them. They love it, truth be told. And so coachable, and Kristen probably just discouraged with me. But anyway, bottom line is work with them. Give them the sense that they can work with you. And that's very meaningful.
Right. If you have other questions, we'll get a chance at the end. And now we're going to switch to Ryan.
That's a lot of words. Okay. Yeah, so I got a few slides. So I am the president, CEO, and a co-founder of CranioSense. So this first slide is about me, and then I do a shameless plug right after this for anybody that has some money. But basically, we're a little louder.
Sorry,
project.
No. In the back.
So
stand up and talk to. This is easy.
All right.
So So I mean, a lot of you are entrepreneurs, but basically being a CEO is you're responsible for everything. I mean, my major roles right now being raising and trying to build the business, corporate strategy, corporate risk reduction, all that sort of stuff is probably top of my bill right now, including fundraising. But I do everything from, I'm also the first person to want to order coffee. So I'm also the person that goes to get the coffee. I think that's probably a nice role to work in with like 6 people we have right now. But that's probably half the people here doing everything, staying up 3 hours, at night, trying to get things done. I have nearly 15 years of experience specifically in neuro, specifically bringing things from kind of inception ideas all the way through to, realizing them, actually working them, demonstrating clinical efficacy, all that sort of stuff. And it personally raised about $10 million in non-dilutive funding. So we're not going to talk about that tonight, but you guys don't have to give any of your company away if you want to go get a grant. That was kind of my area of specialty. That's actually how we started CranioSense. So $10 million, and then have my team has raised about $20 million in 5 years in non-dilutive funding alone. So CranioSense. So shamelessly, the holy grail of neurology. We're bringing a non-invasive and unobtrusive means of detecting intracranial hypertension. So too much pressure on your brain. Think after you bump your knee or after you bump your shin. I was telling us a little bit earlier, and that blows up to 3 times the size. Your brain doesn't really have anywhere for that to go. So concussions, traumatic brain injuries, and then strokes and cardiac arrest, a lot of bad things. Basically, at this stage, we are putting a hole in your back, your spine, or your head to understand what the intracranial pressure is. We really only do that for about 1% of the population. So we're bringing the means of assessing what's going on in the brain really early in the process. So think pre-hospital sideline. Our first market is in the emergency department, really helping triage people, getting them through to either getting them care or sending them home, making sure that we do follow-ups later. So again, non-dilutive funding, about $10 million in the basic research, and then about $2 million in non-dilutive funding in the product development. So we've actually gotten past, we talked about this a little bit before, a little bit past, certainly past singular angels, unless Elon wants to return my call, but also potentially a little bit past being able to fund our entire round with angel groups. So we're actually looking for a Series A rounds currently. Again, if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, raising $10 million of equity round right now. So we've used the non-dilutive funding to kind of play around is kind of a bad word or a bad term to phrase it as, but we de-risked a lot of our technical, a lot of our clinical by leveraging grants, leveraging contracts to really explore different spaces, see how our novel revolutionary technology will play in the field, but then going into customer discovery. So really marrying a business model with the science. And so we were able to get that, kind of flex that out within the non-dilutive funding. Now, since we know where we need to go, we're raising an equity round right now to basically sprint towards that, right? So the marriage of the two has been really great for us. That will also get us, I talked a little bit about, putting what that gets you, right? So we're raising $10 million of equity to get all the way through our FDA process, which a lot of our comps that we're looking at are exiting right after FDA approval. That puts us around $150 million valuation for that exit right there. So we talk about making, turning 1 and 1 into 33. That would basically put 10 and 10 to 150, right? So that's a good kind of segue into that math. So I think this is probably more what you guys came to.
Does this work? Is it moved?
Something came up.
Maybe if you click on the slide and then try to.
Perfect. Okay.
All right, so I'm here to talk about kind of the preparation for getting ready to go talk to investors, and then venture capital. There's a mix. We're kind of in the middle range. So we are entertaining some angel groups and things like that, but realize that again, you're not going to fill the whole round with it. So yeah, getting into kind of the preparation to get there, and then the process, and then some of those great questions that are already being asked. I kind of touch on those a little bit. So first, I think a good this is going to be a rough way to frame this, and I won't go too deep into the analogy, but this is kind of like you're dating again to some level, right? It's very relationship based. You have to do a lot of introspection. You have to know what you want. You have to know who offers that, right? You have to know what your skill set is and what you're looking at from somebody else. And then it goes into the relationship and who you're looking for in terms of if it's symbiotic, or some people like the authoritarian. I mean, sometimes those people write really, really big checks and you don't really care because you're going to sprint past it and you're Elon and it's fine, right? So you have to figure out what you want, what your company needs, and then you have to go find it. So I think that the first part is be deliberate. We talked about being pithy in your emails, but just you have to kind of communicate what you want in almost everything, right? So communicating what you're offering them, going into, so if Bruce is here, I'd be talking about the fact that I reached out to him at the very beginning of my journey through the Resi platform. Resi is kind of a place where you can meet angels and venture capitalists and all sorts of people, other startups. It's a kind of a pitch competition, but I reached out to him. It was horrible. I looked back at the email and it was long and drawn out, and I didn't know what I wanted and I didn't know what I needed. There's so many different ways that you can look at what Bruce is doing. Let's use him for that's venture capital. Who they invested in before. Why would that be important to you? Why would you be interesting to them, right? Communicate all of that stuff up front so that you're not letting them make up their mind necessarily for you, right? You're putting your best foot forward. There's so many resources. You do not have to go pay $20,000 for a pitch book. You can just go to UIUC and go to business school and get it for free. And I work in a school. I should probably throw that on there. But there's resources, Crunchbase, Google, all sorts of things. Be deliberate in what you're looking for and why. You don't want to waste your time is so valuable. You can totally be very, I'm the CEO. My time's important, but don't waste their time either. That'll totally catch up to you in the end. Time is valuable. It's much more, in my opinion, valuable than $1. So I think the next thing is be prepared. You're all the CEOs, or you're some form of entrepreneur, right? Do your homework, over prepare, and once you're ready, then throw it all out, because you're just about to get in a conversation with a bunch of people, right? So be flexible at the end. So you want to be armed with everything that you know when you go into a conversation with somebody, and then just feel it to someone, right? We talked about charisma, but it is being flexible. They're going to have their own personal baggage that they bring. They're going to have their own experiences, their own expertise, right? You're going to have to kind of feel that person out. It's a lot like dating, right? You're starting to say, okay, this person actually cares about this part of the business. They want to dive deep into that. Let me just lean on that. Let me talk to them about that. Get them interested in that. But if you are not prepared, that will really, they start to dive into an area that you have no idea what. So definitely do your homework, both on your business, but also them, right? And your market in general. And then listen, right? You will not know anything about them if you don't actively listen. Like if you don't sit there and just take in what they're saying to you and what that means, you're just going to be talking to, you might as well be talking to the window, right? Like they're going to see that so quickly that whatever they just said to you went right over your head. You took the notes, you regurgitated it, and then you said whatever the heck you want to do after that, right? Listen to them. It's important. You're gonna gain value. If we just need to think about ourselves for a second, you're gonna gain so much more information about that person and about their wants and their needs than just talking. And believe me, I love to talk. This is actually, we talk about being coachable or learning and growing. This is one of my deficiencies. Like I'll just say that, right? Listening and not preparing my next statement is something that I will always work on. It's just something that I focus on myself. So I'm saying this from this part's not easy. Some of these other things are easy, but like that listening part is not really my forte. So the last part though is being yourself. So I know certain areas where I'm deficient, right? Let other people tell you where you're deficient. That's the coachability stuff. But just be yourself. Like if somebody dangles a check in front of you and you completely change yourself to get that check, and you lock that in, and you take that money, you now have to be that person for so long, right? That either they're going to figure you out and hate you, or you're going to end up probably hating yourself. Right? Just be yourself. That doesn't mean screw the investors, right? And like if they don't like me, well, I'll just go find somebody else. It just means like be honest, be true to what you're trying to do. Don't try to, be a chameleon. There's a chameleon here somewhere. Let's see. That's his company. It's not him. But just be real, because you also, this is not going to be the last time you raise. This is not going to be the last person is your boss, right? Your board, you're the people that you have to answer to. You're going to be asking again, and if you're honest and you're just yourself, you can live with yourself that much longer, right? So it's not all about. So I mean, that's kind of the bulk of my stuff. It's it's more probably how to be a leader than like do your business plan and that sort of stuff. but it is the stuff that you're going to need to be armed with before you go out. Realize that it's a learning process. Like it will always be a learning process. You're going to go, you could learn something beautiful at like a pre-seed and seed stage when you're talking to an angel group, and then it will, or an angel, singular, and then that will completely change when you go to venture capital. And that will completely change when you're considering going IPO. Like all that stuff, it's learning. Okay, you're gonna fail, you're gonna learn, but be coachable, like for yourself. Don't be coachable for the money. That's one reason be coachable, but just grow, right, and continue to try to grow for yourselves. That's basically it. Yeah,
it's awesome.
Sure.
And I have a question for you on practicing, because I was at Redzi and a judge on the panel, and I have known Ryan, and I watched one of the venture capital guys who is an MD nail you on your theory, and you handled it very elegantly. You considered it, and so that listen skill and being able to answer, all eyes in the room were watching that, and I remember that. Ooh, you did that really good. So I'm sure you practice a lot to be able to not respond immediately with your life's work.
Yeah, it's hard not to get defensive. Defensive is a good word. There's a certain amount you don't want to be. You don't want to get up there and be like,
that was my point.
You don't want to get up there and be like,
so I will just wanted to reflect that, and then I'll open it up into questions. Let's start.
You talked about non-dilutive funding.
Mm-hmm.
What are the resources that you use to find those opportunities?
So those are generally speaking grants and government contracts and things like that. It's a different type of selling, but it's not unlike kind of you're asking for money and you're putting a different foot forward. There are, depending on your field, there's different mechanisms. So my field is all medical devices. So, perfect. So there's the NIH, there's the NSF. So sorry. They're all acronyms. The National Institute of Health. There's different institutes, BARDA, Bio Advanced Research Development Association, something. There is the NSF, so National Science Foundation. There are SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Awards, STTRs. There's a whole bunch. I'll give you my card.
I was wondering if there's more like, is there anybody that aggregates that?
We actually had an ENET session on it. So if you go to the archives and you look at other funding, sitting in the audience. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you need to, excellent presentation. So do you need to research the angel investors? Do you need that whom you're going to meet, and you need to have to learn about them before like talking to them?
Yeah,
Does it matter?
It can, if you can do it, it definitely makes a difference. I mean, you're again, they have their own experiences, they have their own backgrounds. We have an angel investor right here. She'll probably talk about some of her background. She's in regulatory, clinical, that sort of stuff. So she's going to have questions slanted towards that, right? She's going to know more about that space. And so one of your major roles, and one of my major roles, is to de-risk everything, right? And is to basically be able to respond to the questions that they have. Those questions generally are risks to them, right? Well, why would you do this and not that? So understanding where they're coming from will allow you to speak to that a little bit better. Now you can't always do that, but you can always be you can defer kind of the response and say, we have that information. I'd be happy to follow up with you in a few weeks. Maybe we could set up some other times, and here's what I'm going to give you. We have a full clinical trial plan. It'll get us from today to where the money will end, and then in the future, I'd love to go over that with you, just to make sure that you understand what we're trying to achieve. Yeah. That will also tee up your next. So the point, I should go into more detail. The point of your first conversation is to get another conversation. Maybe, well, I don't know anybody that writes a check on day one. Maybe somebody does. I don't know, but
No.
so
Maybe Elon Musk.
I haven't. Yeah, maybe.
This is down Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I'll do it. They even do it in Silicon Valley. I think those days are kind of well past. But the your point is you're always trying to get to the next conversation. You'll basically get to a point where they'll start to want to dig in deeper. They'll ask to get into your data room, which is more of kind of a business model nowadays. There's no business model document per se, but it's all the backup information that you have for all of your stuff. And then you'll go to, if they continue on, you go to a term sheet. So like you're trying to progress through this like very kind of specific timeline, but it's always to get to the next one. So if you can tee up, hey, I realize that you're coming, you're asking these questions about this. I would love to go into more detail. Why don't give me 4 weeks? I'm gonna get it together, all this information for you, and then reach back out to them and say, hey, it's been 3 weeks. Here's a little teaser for this information that you're asking about. I have more information to share with you. Why don't we set up like 30 minutes to go through? So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, if you can stand up and project to the back of the room. And
so I'm a device and diagnostics person. I worked at big companies and I went to small companies. And I worked with private equity groups that built a med tech service platform. And then I founded my own company. And I do a lot of due diligence for investors. So I'm either your best friend or usually I try to be your best friend. Try to tell you what you need. And I do, so that's what I'm doing now. And I'm an investor also. I'm also an angel investor. So I wanted to talk about what people usually ask me to do is review a regulatory strategy, review the clinical data plan, and then also look to see if this product is actually going to be paid for by who's going to pay for this product, if it's a medical device or diagnostics. So I won't make, should I make a joke? Sure. My biggest problem is when someone comes there, I get someone that says, "You take a look at this. It's really great." And then like, "Oh, it's only class 1." And I'm like, "Okay, it's a PMA and needs $12 million study." So just if you make sure you know those kind of things because they'll ask someone like me to take a look at it. And if you're class 1, that's great, but make sure you know what your regulatory strategy is and how much it's going to cost you to get to market because that's what they're investing in. It's really smart.
Or any question you want to say, you speak up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said make sure you know that your regulatory strategy aligns with what you're asking for funding. I've never been quiet.
it's a long room.
Okay. Yeah. And then I didn't put this on here, but global is also really important. A lot of investors these days want to know, are you going to go, like, can you use this money? Can you go outside the US? Can you go to Europe? Can you go to Canada? Where else can you go? Because that just is a multiplier on their investment. So, you should know that too. You're going to get asked usually.
I think what Vicki said is really, you've heard it from Jeff for the kickoff as far as knowing what you're raising and smart money. And then we had a question on business plan and how much detail, and that angels will go across their own internal group to get experts like Vicki. So we will say, is $1 million enough? What do you think? Because if you need more money in 6 months, and that's the level of detail. And it's great to be transparent and be like, well, we don't know all of it, but at least you talk to somebody and have some kind of regulatory letter. Because then we'll go, Vicki, what do you think? Mm-hmm. Right? And then it goes to timing and out. So, and then diligence, as she said, we don't pay Vicki. It's just part of Boston Harbor Angels, right? Exactly. So, and Corrett's too. But know that folks have this. Okay.
And I invest too.
Right. So Vicki invests. Oh, they must be spot on with regulatory reimbursement. Good.
Yeah.
I can't. Can you do it, Millie? I don't know. Let me go over that. Next slide.
So when I get asked to review companies, these are the things I look for. What geography are you planning? You know, are you going to launch in? Do you know your regulatory requirements in all those countries, and how much can you leverage from one to another? What are your data collection needs? And also be very careful about what claims you make about your what your regulatory classification is. Make sure you actually know it. And also you should know how you're going to get paid for your product. What's your reimbursement model? Because
Can you speak up a little louder?
okay, sorry. Sorry. I said make sure you know your reimbursement model too. And in some cases, there's multiple pathways. You can be a class 2 for one claim on your product, and then you can also be a class 3. And some investors may want you to be class 3 because it's a game changer. So you need to be open to listening to them. Okay. Here we go. Next slide.
Oh, did you want to go more, Vicki?
No, I think I just have one more. Right?
Yep.
So this is, I think I already talked to this. I'm just trying to be sufficient. So they will want to, they will bet your what you're saying you need for money to get to market. So make sure you have someone who's done that for you. It's real.
That's real.
It's real. It has to be real. It has to be real because you ask for $2 million and no. And I'm an angel investor, so I love seeing a really good regulatory strategy and also quality requirements, which people forget about all the time. Do you have to have your own quality system? Are you outsourcing everything? And if you are, show me how you know so that you don't get a product that then gets full up. I kept it pretty short.
Yeah. And then I think to your point on how much you're raising, we've heard being transparent, right? So everybody's doing something novel. We've got a lot of gene treatments. We've got a lot of cool stuff. If you come and you say you only need $500,000 or 500,000, then you might get asked, well, how much in the next race, right? So that's probably one of the biggest things to say. Where are you now? But then how much more? Have some kind of an idea, because we're going to go to her. We're going to say, how much are those clinicals talking? Just on dilution, right? So especially thank you for raising smart money.
Especially if you have multiple claims. Yep. If you have the possibility of multiple claims.
Okay, well, question, because you have an expert up here. Fire away.
How much experience have you had with the breakthrough medical device program at the FDA? It sounds so appealing, like you go in.
I'm involved in 3 right now.
Okay, and tell us about your experience.
Well, the FDA loves that program. So if you can get through and get classified as that, it's I love the people because you get so.
Is it real?
It's real, and you get someone. So you get those sprint calls that you have. I don't know if you know what it is. You get assigned a team at the FDA. And when you call them, you have a call within a couple of days, and the people who are on the call can actually answer the question, tell you what you need to do.
Okay. Is it relatively fast track that we say you get an answer within 60 days? And
yes,
I've had 2 regulatory people say, don't count on that. Like big time, don't count on that.
Yeah. I know 3 right now that got their answer within 60 days.
Okay.
And they got approval for breakthrough.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's great to be able to say in your pitch, and by the way, we've been designated a breakthrough medical, device by the FDA.
Because it is a fast track. I mean, it doesn't reduce your clinical data needs, but it does definitely get you all the sort of immediate answers from the FDA.
Sure. Those are invaluable.
Yeah. If you have even if you get bad data from your you can call your sprint team at the FDA and they'll help you.
That's awesome. You must have a team. Thank you for your question.
Yeah. Well, I tend to speak with you later.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have a question?
One more.
So after you're designing the class 2 medical device, so I think you mentioned that class 3 is better than class 2. So
No.
they want them to be class 3.
No, I know. I'm sorry. No, if you are class 2, that's great. It's just when people go to investors and they say we're class 1.
It depends on claims, right? If you can hit a bigger market size by having a really cool claim, but it's class 3 and it'll take a little longer, well, then you've got to make that argument and say, give me a little bit more money. This is what I'm using, but I'm going to.
But if you're truly class 2 and it's been validated by somebody, on due diligence, that's good. And it means you're going to use less of your money to get to market.
Right.
But so I'll try to make a little joke here, but my worst thing is when I'm working with investors and they say, oh, we have a class 1 product. And I look at it, I go, it's a class 3.
Well, it's a huge.
I'm like, I'm sorry.
The difference between sticking it in someone and having someone walk with it.
And angel investors don't like that either.
No.
No, they don't like to be here. So okay.
What's either the biggest red flags or the things you like to see in reviewing a combination product proposal?
I just like to see that you have references to other products, other combination products, and you know what the clinical will be. Because clinicals, again, when I'm, I want a real plan for clinical, because otherwise, you may not be asking for the right amount of money. And if it's a really good combination product, everyone wants it to go to market, but you have to have the right clinical products. So that's what I look at. Okay.
You have time?
More? Yeah, there's a comment on the online. I've been told that investors do not want to pay for clinical trials. Is that absolutely true? One exception.
No, they always pay. Go ahead, you answer that one.
They always pay. They have to pay.
They have to pay. If they're investing early.
And I think no one really talked, just to echo that, is the partnership. Usually, if you're an angel investor, you're going to do the follow-on rounds, or your goal is because you want to continue to support. It may not be the largest check, but you want to continue to support, right?
The claims start coming out, the valuation. Right.
So it may not be the full clinic. Somebody's paying. And you've been waiting.
I feel like there's an underlying theme in the whole regulatory question that everybody's been asking, even with the joke he was making about somebody saying they were class 1, but they were in class 2. I just think my question more or less is, what is a healthy level of regulatory uncertainty at the time, right? Because we don't have any instances, right? And I'm going to assume that the person who told you that their device was a class 1, but they were wrong, probably did not have the access to get the right answer. And, a part of being honest, as you mentioned, right, is to be vulnerable, to be honest about that we don't know everything. We know our product, we know our market, but we don't have all the answers, hence which is why we're coming with people like you guys. So what's a healthy level of, regulatory uncertainty at the earliest stage? Well, at the stage where we will approach a venture, like, VC venture or angel. Okay. Like, what's a healthy level of that matters?
So they will find out what the strategy is. If you have resources through any networks like this, you should at least get a preliminary, try to find someone who will work with you just to get a preliminary review of what you're saying. Or I do that for a lot of people through different groups.
Yeah, they might not dig in deep. Like you can always
defer
and say
a little louder.
Right?
Yeah.
They might not if you you can come to them and say we've talked to a consultant for half an hour. We think it's a class 2 device. We think we're going to need animal data here and clinical here. We're going to go to the FDA to confirm that. We need money to do that, right? That's totally fair, right? I think it's some of it's about coachability to some level. It's don't go in there and say it's a class 1, right? And especially if you don't know what it is, right? give your premise for why you think it's that, right? Whether it's you talk to somebody that knows, or you've done it before, or there's somebody that's just like you and you're like, we're like them. But then say
Great
that you
point.
would go,
Predicate.
yeah,
Somebody else that's in.
And you can usually find people in groups like this who will at least look at like what you're saying and give you a
direction, right?
Yeah. Say, I think you maybe require a class or actually you don't need as much data as you're saying. A lot of people in networks that will at least
Great questions. I know we're running over. Do we have another one?
Yeah, that's another online question. How much of your company's equity should one plan on giving away at each fundraising stage? And how does one calculate or estimate that amount?
Mr. VC.
where do we want to start? The calculation's easy, right? The calculation of what your valuation is you look at comparables in the space, right? What stage are they at? What did they raise? What was their valuation? That's on Crunchbase and PitchBook, and you can find that information. So you know how much other people were worth when they raised what they raised. The amount of money that the amount of equity that you give up is basically based on your post money valuation. So if hypothetically you were raising $10 million on a $15 million valuation, it's 10 divided by 25. It's the sum of those two, right? So that's the percentage of equity that you would have to make available to those people that are investing. How much to give up? There's a lot of strategy around that. So, for example, that $10 million that we're raising, we are likely going to tranche that up into two different, not rounds per se, but two different asks. One $5 million to get to first demand. So has to be a value inflection point that where you have this bump in valuation. And then another $5 million. What that will actually allow us to do is raise $5 million on a $15 million valuation. So we're giving up 5 divided by 20. And then at that point where we have to raise again first demand, we're likely going to be around a $30 million valuation, which would be 5 on 35, right? So you're instead of raising all that 10 on the 50, there's a lot of math, I apologize.
But it depends, right?
Yeah.
And there's no rules. It's what the founder's comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then your decision to go to VC versus angel and check size, right? So
I think the important part too, just to finalize that, is you're going to have a lead investor. You're going to want to work with your lead investor on setting that valuation. A lot of times, maybe most of the time, they will be setting some of that valuation. Like you could negotiate like, hey, we have comparables here. Like we think we're a little bit more, and maybe they tweak it a little bit. But your lead investor is going to be the person that really sets that initial valuation, and then a lot of your secondary investors will kind of follow suit to some level.
One clarification: it depends on what phase you're at.
Sure,
if you are pre-revenue and pre-FDA.
Yeah.
Then after.
Yeah. Then after.
Just to clarify.
Which is all.
Sure. Yeah, the best response I've heard of that question was at a group of VCs, and someone said, "How do you value pre-revenue startups?" They goes, $2 million. No, 2 million. And he said, because it's impossible to value a pre-revenue startup company.
Yeah.
You're basically going to somewhat pick a number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should look at comparables. That's where they're probably going to look as well. But yeah, it is dark magic to some level of like it is
comfort, right? You can pick your Okay, and we have networking for the next half hour.
All right. Let's give a hand to our panel.